Thank you so much to everyone who has joined us. We're really excited to present this work today. We'll be presenting on the findings that are in our newly published report on enrollment trends in Universal Prekindergarten in Vermont in the 2016-17 school year. So thank you for being here today. So just a really brief overview of the agenda. I know for those of you who joined early, you heard Julie give a brief overview, but first we'll start with welcome and introductions. Then we will provide an overview of Vermont's Universal Prekindergarten or preK law that will be provided by Kate Rogers, the Early Learning Programs Manager at the Agency of Education. Then I'll provide a brief overview of the findings from the study. At this point, I do want to point to you that we do have some files that you can download today, which include the slides from today, but also the report itself down in the bottom, left-hand corner of your screen. And then once we wrap up an overview of the findings, we'll have a brief question and answer session with Vermont Deputy Secretary Dr. Heather Bouchey. And we have some questions that came in during the registration that we will tackle, but also some questions that we hope all of you will be engaged in the chat and providing questions throughout. So please do use the chat actively, interact with each other, send in questions to us so that we can make sure that we have a nice interactive conversation with Deputy Secretary Bouchey. And then, of course, we'll wrap up. So there are two main goals for today. One is, of course, to share our findings from our first study, Enrollment Rates of Children in Universal Prekindergarten Programs in Vermont in 2016-17. But our other is to facilitate a discussion with the Vermont Agency of Education regarding the policy implications of the study and how the research has informed the work of the agency. So wanting to really talk about how this partnership work is resonating in Vermont and how they're using it. Just a brief overview, I am Dr. Clare Irwin. I work at EDC for the REL Northeast Islands. I do lead the Vermont Universal Pre-K Research Partnership. I am also joined by Dr. Heather Bouchey, who is the Deputy Secretary, as we've mentioned, of Vermont Agency of Education. Deputy Secretary Bouchey oversees all programmatic divisions within the Agency of Education, including data management and analysis, education quality, federal education support programs, student pathways, and student support services. She earned her Bachelor of Science at Cornell and PhD at the University of Denver with postdoctoral training at the University of Michigan. Deputy Secretary Bouchey has published extensively in the fields of education and psychology, and the aspects of her work she loves most include both team development and collaborative problem solving, as well as bringing data to bear on policy solutions. So we're very excited to have her here today to talk to how AOE, or the Agency of Education, is bringing data to bear through this partnership and through the work that we've been doing on Universal Pre-K. So we're really excited to speak with her in a little bit. And then we're also joined by Kate Rogers, who is the Early Learning Programs Manager, as I mentioned, for the Agency of Education. She's worked in many different roles and capacities in early education over her career. She's been a child care provider, a home visitor, a teacher, a school district early childhood special educator, and she's also been an early childhood education program coordinator. So she's got a variety of experiences that she brings to bear. Currently, she oversees the early learning programs, which also includes Universal Prekindergarten. Kate represents AOE on numerous state interagency and policy committees and has served as a governor-appointed member of Vermont's Part C Interagency Coordinating Council. So as you can tell, we have some really amazing guests with us today, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. So each regional educational lab, or REL, works primarily within partnerships and alliances with state and local education stakeholders. Alliances and partnerships are defined as collaborations between researchers and practitioners and policymakers. And the Vermont Universal Pre-K Research Partnership is a collaboration among the REL Northeast Islands, the Vermont Agency of Education, and the Vermont Agency of Human Services, and specifically the Child Development Division within the Agency of Human Services. During the first year of the partnership, which began in 2017, which was also the first year of full implementation of Universal Pre-K in Vermont, the partnership engaged in several workshops and meetings to brainstorm the topics related to Act 166, which is the Universal Pre-K legislation, which were most pressing, and also drafted a 5-year research agenda that will guide our work through 2022. Our current membership includes a variety of individuals across these agencies. So we have the Deputy Secretary, we have Kate Rogers, the Early Learning Programs Manager, as well as the Director of Data Analysis and Management and the Universal Pre-K Program Manager. At the Child Development Division, we also have the Deputy Commissioner and Policy Director. We also have the Head Start Collaboration Officer, which I'm sorry I don't have on this slide, as well as we've recently pulled in the Executive Director from Building Bright Futures to be part of this partnership. So you can tell it's a very extensive partnership that really takes into account multiple perspectives. Okay, so that's a very brief overview and introduction, and at this point I'm actually going to pass the baton over to Kate Rogers to provide an overview of Vermont's Universal Prekindergarten law.
Hi, this is Kate. Thank you, Claire, and I want to thank REL for inviting Heather and I to be part of this presentation today. We've looked forward to sharing with you all. So I'm going to just give a brief overview of Vermont's pre-K education legislation, Act 166. Act 166 was brought into place in 2014 to support children's access to publicly funded pre-K education. And this is for children ages 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who are not yet enrolled in kindergarten. Universal Pre-K in Vermont means each and every child, 3 and 4. There's no eligibility criteria, hence the universal piece of that is actually a real thing. So it's been a pleasure to put that forward, and also a challenge as the state and school districts and private programs work to ensure that all children receive a pre-K education, at least 10 hours a week. So part of the pre-K education programs include, as you can see on the slide, private child care centers, Head Start centers, public school-operated pre-K programs, and home-based providers as well. Each of these programs must go through a pre-qualification process that's verified through the Agency of Human Services, Child Development Division, and with the Agency of Education. So we work very closely with the Agency of Human Services to verify all information that programs submit on their applications. And if everything is good to go, then we will approve them as a pre-qualified private or public pre-K program. So a brief history of how we got from here to there. Basically, in Vermont, we use that phrase quite a lot because we have a mountain range going down the center of the state, and everyone needs to know how we got from here to there. So way back in the mid-'80s, and actually prior to that, Vermont was supportive of including young children, 3 and 4-year-olds, in their school district programs. The first program was actually in Burlington, centered out the Ira Allen building within that school district, and they served mostly children with disabilities. However, they also incorporated peers to support children's overall development and learning among their same age peers. And that just grew and blossomed across the state for years. So when we got to about 1987, as you'll see on the slide, federal legislation came down from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to ensure that all children with disabilities, birth through 21, received supports through states. And Vermont had to, of course, put in place services. At that time, it was Part H for infants and toddlers, and then it ultimately changed to Part C with a reauthorization of IDA. But programs and services were grounded by the federal law, and Vermont already was ahead of the game in that respect. So as we move forward in time, back in about 97, Act 60 was passed by the legislature, which included funding for pre-K students on a prorated basis, that school districts were able to count those children that they served in their preschool programs in our annual census and then ADM counts. Moving forward, in 2006, Act 186 created a study commission that actually led to a new voluntary Act 62 in 2007 that required, of course, always for children with disabilities or early childhood special education piece, but allowed districts to have voluntary pre-K. So some districts took part in Act 62 to provide pre-K education for their students of residence, and some did not. But it also supported the collaboration between the Agency of Education and the Agency of Human Services, the Child Development Division with that. As we move forward to about 2010, under Act 159, the Act focused on struggling schools to fully count the pre-K students who were enrolled in their programs. So another piece of legislation, as you see it moving forward, to really support our pre-K, preschool age students in receiving pre-K education, and also being counted in the funding mechanism as well. Moving on to 2014, we finally passed Act 166, which provides mandatory access that school districts must provide for Universal K for, again, our 3, 4, and 5-year-old children not yet enrolled in kindergarten. And I'm going to lay out a few key features of Act 166. So school districts are required to offer the 10 hours of pre-K education for each of their resident children for 35 weeks over the academic year. Now, this is a voluntary program still for the parents, so if they want to take the opportunity, it's there. If they don't, that's fine, but school districts must offer the opportunity. Parents also have choice of where to enroll their child, which is one of the major key points of Act 166. School districts establish contracts with local child care programs, Head Start programs, home-based programs, and with other public school districts to ensure that their children who live in their towns have equal access and opportunity for those children to participate and enroll in a neighboring district's pre-K program as well. So we've got some mechanisms in place to support that, the parent choice piece. Another key feature is the statewide tuition rate. This tuition rate is adjusted each year. It utilizes the New England Economic Project Cumulative Price Index, and we average about, per child who is enrolled in pre-K, it's about $3,350, and that's an annual rate that school districts would then provide funding for children who are enrolled in private pre-K programs within their district or outside their district. And the programs, again, must be like a pre-qualified approved program. And we do have an application process that we have created, and it's a joint agency application process between Agency of Human Services and the Agency of Education to verify all the necessary requirements and to verify evidence that a program is ready to become a pre-qualified pre-K program and is recognized as that. Another key feature is that all programs need to have a licensed early childhood educator or an early childhood special educator as the lead teacher for the program. Now, based on our rules, the public preschool programs must have a licensed educator on site at all times, just like a 6th grade teacher or a 12th grade teacher. The private programs, it's a bit different. A licensed educator needs to be within the building and oversee the pre-K education that is happening within that center and that classroom. Curriculum is aligned with the Vermont Early Learning Standards. Programs are also required to do child progress monitoring. We use Teaching Strategies Gold as our approved state measurement for that process. TS Gold is aligned with our Vermont Early Learning Standards as well as our Kindergarten Readiness Survey. So we're getting a lot of good data coming into our state longitudinal data system that support and will support in the future some good reliable data to show that pre-K in Vermont is being effective and it is making a difference for our children. I think I have a few minutes left. Let me see. I think I shared a little bit about, oh, I know where I wanted to go. Sorry. So currently, in like last year, and I might have Heather help me with this, Vermont legislature passed Act 173, which again supports struggling learners across the state. So with that, we are looking at revising our special education rules to encompass what that means, but it also provides supports for young children of preschool age and what that looks like. We utilize early MTSS as a major mode of, I'll just call it an initiative to really support each and every child's access and participation in the programs that they are enrolled in. So our pre-K enrollment, as you can see, in the first year of implementation, it was in 2015, and we had about 6,200 children enrolled. And the numbers, this was considered our early adopting year. So districts had, given the rules passage in 2014, the districts have an opportunity to start right up and provide pre-K education for each child in their school districts, or they could wait a year. And FY16 is after they had waited a year, and FY17 is full implementation, that everyone needed to be on board and providing pre-K education for each 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old not yet enrolled in kindergarten within the district. You'll see the numbers have grown, and then they are becoming more stable and steady. So we, for this coming year, we anticipate still to see about 8,600, 8,700 children counted in this year's enrollment. So, and I think,
Great.
Oh, I did forget one thing, and I have 1 minute left. So we are and have established a pre-K monitoring system. It is referred to as our Universal Pre-K Accountability and Continuous Improvement System. Again, it's joint agency oversight for that, and it is a tiered system And it's also a balanced approach. We're looking at ensuring that all programs are in compliance with the 11 requirements under the law, but it's balanced with the training, professional development, and technical assistance that is needed to ensure that all programs are in good standing and maintain and to continue to be a pre-qualified pre-K program. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate. And we did have a couple of questions come in, and we did have a few questions from registration that would help us, I think, clarify some of the specifics of the program. So that was a really wonderful overview. Thank you. I think the first thing I did want to just remind folks of, for those who hadn't hopped on yet when I first started presenting, is that today's slides are already available. If you scroll down, or if you look down in the bottom left, you can download today's slides as well as the report that was just published. In addition to, we are recording today's session, and we will, anyone who registered will get an email link sent to them once the recording is available. So that's just a side note. But we did have a question coming in from Melissa asking Kate whether there is a cap on class size.
So thanks, Melissa. There is not a cap on class size. However, because public schools and private programs must adhere to the child care licensing regulations, there is, they do have capacity given the square footage of their classroom. So that does actually cap the size of children, the number of children, sorry, that are included within that particular classroom. So that's our child care licensing regulations.
Great, thank you. And then there was a question here from Caitlin regarding whether there were any full-day programs or only half-day.
So districts, yep.
Keep going,
so
sorry.
Districts, oh, sorry, Claire. So some districts have decided to provide full-day pre-K programs for their students. Some do, some don't. There's a variety of different ways that school districts are providing the pre-K hours of instruction for children, whether it's AM sessions, PM sessions, full-day sessions, only maybe there's a 2-day-a-week session. So it varies across the state. It varies widely, for sure. We, in the past 4 years, we received a preschool development expansion grant, and part of that grant was to focus on our universal pre-K programs to support school districts, and that also included Head Starts, to implement a full-day pre-K program. So we had some great success given our preschool development grant. The past 4 years, we do have data to support that it was absolutely effective with the quality indicators that were required given the scope of work for that grant itself. So that supported, from those programs that implemented full-day program, about 68% of those programs sustained the full-day programs, which was very exciting to see, and we didn't anticipate that. So that was a great piece of work that those programs did.
Wonderful, great, thank you. And we did have several questions that came in through registration, but I think I might, just in the, for time's sake, I might jump into the presentation on the work that we've done, the research project, and then we can circle back during the Q&A later on with the agency folks to answer any additional kind of programmatic questions that everyone may have. So thank you, Kate.
No, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of the findings. Again, you can download the report. I encourage you to go there. The appendices of the report have a lot more information on the specifics of the methods, but we wanted to make sure that the key takeaways and what we found were out there and people were talking about them. So the study we're presenting on today came directly from the research agenda that we developed as a partnership. So I had mentioned we developed an agenda together. 3 research questions that were collaboratively developed with the Agency of Education and Human Services guided the study and really were concerned around enrollment in publicly funded pre-K. So there are 2 descriptive questions, excuse me. So one was to what extent are children with different characteristics enrolled in public school pre-K programs, private pre-K programs, and programs at each STARS quality rating. So as Kate mentioned, it's a mixed delivery system. We have both private and public providers, and then we have providers that are 3, 4, and 5 stars. And so wanting to understand if the characteristics of children enrolled in those different settings. And then to what extent are pre-K children enrolled in a program within the boundaries of their local education agency? So again, really wanting to understand our children, our families of children, really taking advantage of the portability, right? So you don't have to enroll just within the physical boundaries of your local education agency. You can actually, in most cases, go outside as well. So wanting to have an understanding of that. And then the third research question asked, after other characteristics are controlled for, which characteristics of pre-K children are associated with the likelihood of being enrolled in a public school rather than a private pre-K program, a 5-star program versus a 3 or 4-star program, and a program within rather than outside the boundaries of a child's local education agency. And just a note that we might use local education agency and supervisory union interchangeably. So I apologize for that, but supervisory union is the LEA in Vermont. Okay. So we conducted analyses using data collected by the Agency of Education during the first year of full implementation, as I've mentioned, which is the 2016-17 school year. Analyses were conducted on 5,622 children who are enrolled in pre-K across 282 pre-qualified pre-K programs. So this actually represents approximately 67% of the full sample of children enrolled in pre-K in that year. And the reason for this was data we needed to link to the program of enrollment through their TS Gold system, because not all school district registration forms included the actual program that a child went to. So there was a very robust matching system that the state uses to do that matching, but as happens in matching, we weren't able to match everyone. And I don't want to belabor that point here on this webinar, but please do feel free to, again, go to the report, especially the appendices, where we go into detail. And we specifically go into detail regarding how the sample of children in the study compare to the full sample of children who are enrolled in pre-K. So if that's of interest to you, please feel free to go ahead and do that. So we've organized this in according to the preliminary findings by general questions that they address. So first, where did children in publicly funded pre-K enroll in Vermont in that first year of full implementation? So this slide shows the percent of children enrolled in pre-K programs by whether the program was a public school program compared to a private, 3, 4, or 5 stars, and whether it was inside or outside the child's supervisory union of residence. First, children in pre-K were fairly evenly split between programs that were public school and private programs. So you can see 49% were in public programs and 51% were in private. I should note that while family child care providers are included within the private, so that includes both center-based and family providers, but only 46 children in our sample were enrolled at family child care homes. So we had to collapse those together into a private program category. The majority of children enrolled in pre-K were enrolled in 5-star programs, so 61%, with a smaller percentage in 4-star programs, 35%, and the smallest in 3-star programs, so 3%. Last, when we were looking at whether a child was enrolled in a program within the geographic boundaries of their supervisory union, the vast majority, or 83%, were enrolled in the geographic boundaries of their local education agency or supervisory union, but 17% were enrolled outside. And so just to make sure it's extremely clear, because it's a little confusing, when we say that they were enrolled inside their supervisory union of residents, that really does mean the geographic boundaries. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were enrolled in a public school program within the supervisory union, if that makes sense. For the children in the sample, we also examined how many pre-qualified programs were available to them within their supervisory union. So we asked, on average, how many pre-qualified programs were within a child's supervisory union of residents. So what we found, you can see in this figure, is that the average number of pre-qualified pre-K programs that a child had within their supervised union of residents is broken down by what type of program they were enrolled in. So on average, children enrolled in pre-K had about 9 pre-qualified pre-K programs within their supervisory union, but it ranged actually from 0 to 23. So in the appendix of the report, we do have an actual breakdown for every supervisory union, as well as for every region, the number of pre-qualified programs. So there are actually supervisory unions where there are 0 pre-qualified pre-K programs. But on average, there were 9. Children in different program types had different average numbers of programs in their supervisory unions. So for example, we can see that children who enrolled in a public school program had on average 7.6 pre-qualified pre-K programs available to them, whereas children who enrolled in public school programs outside of their supervisory union had an average of only 3.3 pre-qualified programs within the boundaries of their supervisory union. So they had a lot fewer choices within their supervisory union. Children attending private programs had the highest average number of over 11 within their supervisory union. When considering STARS levels, children attending 3-star programs had an average of 2 fewer pre-qualified pre-K programs available to them within their supervisory union compared to children attending 4 or 5-star programs, which you can see that for those it's about the average. So a key takeaway here is that children in private programs had higher than average numbers of programs available to them in their local area. Children who attended public school programs outside of their own supervisory union had the least number of options within their supervisory union, indicating that the availability locally may be related to the programs that children are enrolled in. So next, the partnership requested a more nuanced look at the characteristics of children attending different program types and whether certain child characteristics were associated with an increased likelihood of enrolling in one program type over another. And when we refer to child characteristics, we mean their special education and free or reduced price lunch status as well as their age. So to answer this question, we started with an examination of children enrolled in public school compared to private programs. So on this slide, the purple represents the percentage of children with each of these characteristics who attended private pre-K programs, and the pink represents the percentage of children who attended public school pre-K programs. So we found that a higher percentage of children with IEPs, or individualized education programs, were in public school programs compared to private. And the pattern of enrollment was similar for children eligible for free or reduced price lunch, with a higher percentage of children who are eligible enrolled in public school programs. One thing that we want to bring to your attention around the data for this is that, particularly for the free and reduced price lunch, the reporting might vary, and there might be under-reporting in private programs in terms of the number of children who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch. On this slide, the purple represents the percentage of children, again, who attended private pre-K programs, and the pink, those who attended public school pre-K programs. Across all ages, the split between public and private programs was close to equal, yet you can see that there's a slightly higher percentage of 4-year-olds in public school programs and a slightly higher percentage of 3-year-olds in private programs. So in order to better understand whether there was a relationship between these child characteristics and their likelihood of enrollment in different program types, we conducted a logistic regression analysis. The results of the regression confirmed the descriptive findings that we just discussed. We found that children with an individualized education program were more likely to enroll in a public school program. Children eligible for free or reduced price lunch were also more likely to enroll in a public school program. Children who were older were more likely to enroll in a public school program. The children who had fewer pre-qualified programs located in their supervisory unions were more likely to enroll in a public school program. Next, we examined these child characteristics by STARS level. So on this slide, the purple represents the percentage of children with these characteristics who attended 5-star programs. The pink, those who attended 4-star, and the yellow represents the percentage of children who attended 3-star programs. So the majority of children, regardless of demographic characteristics, were enrolled in 5-star programs, as you saw in a previous slide, while a higher percentage of children with individualized education programs were in 5-star programs compared to children without. So we can see 69% compared to 60%. Again, the purple represents those in 5-star programs, pink is those in 4, and yellow is those in 3. You can see here that 3- and 4-year-old children were primarily in 5-star programs, but enrollment of 5-year-olds was more evenly split between 5- and 4-star programs. Logistic regression analyses revealed that the only characteristic that was significantly associated with enrollment in a 5-star program was individualized education program. So children with an individualized education program were more likely to enroll in a 5-star program than children without one. I do want to note that for the logistic regression analyses, we lumped 3- and 4-star programs together. And this was, again, because of numbers. So there were not very many 3-star programs, and so we had to put them together with the 4-star program for these analyses. And so, sorry, Julie, that's a great question. I'm not going to wait to answer that one. So Vermont has their full quality rating and improvement system, which is the STARS program. I think that we can, in terms of the details of the STARS program, maybe if we have time during the Q&A, we can answer that, or we might be able to put in some information in the chat, a link to the information page for the STARS program. That's a great question. So our final set of analyses looked at how characteristics of children were associated with the likelihood of enrollment inside their supervisory union compared to outside. So on this slide, the purple is the percentage of children with each of these characteristics who attended pre-K inside the boundaries, and the pink represents the percentage of children who attended outside the boundaries of their supervisory union. So to establish whether a child attended a program within the boundaries of their supervisory union, we used child and program zip codes and compared them to zip codes served by each of the supervisory unions or districts. This allowed us to determine if a child attended a program inside or outside the geographic boundaries of the supervisory union within which they live. So a higher percentage of children with individualized education programs and children eligible for free or reduced price lunch were enrolled in programs inside of their supervisory union. On this slide, again, the purple represents children at each age who enrolled within the boundaries, and then the pink is those who enrolled outside of the boundaries. Children of all ages enrolled in pre-K were, there's similar rates across the ages, though you see here a slightly higher, though not significant, higher percentage of 4-year-olds who were enrolled inside compared to outside. Compared to, to 3 and 5-year-olds. Okay, so the partnership was interested in understanding the extent to which families are taking advantage of the ability to enroll in programs outside of their supervisory union. So results for the logistic regression analyses here revealed that children with an individualized education program were more likely to enroll in a program inside of their supervisory union than those without. Children eligible for free or reduced price lunch were more likely to enroll in a program inside of their supervisory union. And not surprisingly, children who had more pre-qualified programs located in their supervisory union were more likely to enroll inside of their supervisory union. So some key takeaways, again, we'll just touch on a few here. Please do check out the full report for more details. But the first one is families who enroll their children in pre-K enroll them in different types of pre-K programs, which aligns with the mixed delivery design of the legislation. So that was the first takeaway. Second, high needs children enrolled in pre-K were more likely to be in public programs and higher rated programs. So specifically, children with individualized education programs were more likely to be in public and higher rated programs, and children with free or reduced price lunch were more likely to be in public programs as well. Children enrolled in pre-K who had fewer pre-qualified programs located within the boundaries of their supervisory union were more likely to be enrolled in public programs and also in programs outside of their supervisory union. They were also more likely to enroll in lower quality programs, which is something also to consider. So it's definitely important to point out some limitations. I think we touched on it earlier with the samples, not the full sample of children enrolled in pre-K. But it's important to emphasize that this is a correlational study and none of our analyses show causal relationships. So for example, we cannot say that having an individualized education program caused children to enroll in public school programs. The sample in our study did not include all children attending pre-K in Vermont. It's something that we've mentioned. Another limitation is that we are not able to get at reasons that families choose different types of programs, and so this is something that we would hopefully be able to tackle in another project with additional data collection. And also, as we mentioned earlier, there is most likely underreporting of free and reduced price lunch status, particularly for private programs, though potentially overall as well. So I'm going to pause for questions, and I think that there have been several that have come through. So I'm just reading through, Meg, your comment here. Right. So Meg is saying that children with IEPs are often required to enroll in school programs to receive their special education services, and then that public school programs. So this is just clarifying potentially why there might be differences. So that's really helpful. Melissa, you're asking, so there's not always choice for families who have children on IEPs to enroll in a private program. This is actually a question that has come up quite frequently in the state regarding whether or not there's full choice for families that have children with special education services to the same degree that there's choice for other families. That's something that we've looked at in a separate evaluation a little bit, but Kate, I don't know if you want to jump in, or Heather, and speak to that. Kate, you obviously are very well aware of the special education requirements.
Sure. Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Meg, for the question. So school districts are obligated to offer special education services to a child and families who have been determined eligible to and entitled to early childhood special education. So they're obligated to offer it. And they're also obligated to write an appropriate IEP based on the child's needs. When we consider where that might happen, that's one of the questions we ask at the kind of end of those conversations. And one of those placement opportunities might be a pre-K program. If the parent, given Act 166, chooses to place their child in a pre-qualified pre-K program outside of the district of residence, the district of residence need to offer an IEP within their own jurisdiction, and the parents can opt to take that opportunity or not. Our pre-K rules state that school districts, at their discretion, may offer services, special education services to children outside their district at their own discretion. So that is in the rules. It is at their own discretion, but districts are obligated to offer FAPE, a free and appropriate public education, within a least restrictive environment for a child who is entitled to receive special education services.
Thank you, Kate. That's a way better answer than I would have given, so I'm glad that I'm glad that you were able to answer that. So just really quickly, Barbara, we did not have suspension and expulsion data, so we did not report on that. I do believe there is an initiative to reduce suspensions and expulsions in pre-K, and of course the definition sometimes varies depending on how, well, I should say there's an overall definition that the state might have, but that data I don't think are readily available across private and public pre-K programs, but I could be corrected on that if necessary.
So Claire, this is Kate. Can I interject?
Yeah, you absolutely may.
Thank you. So the Agency of Education has started to collect suspension and expulsion data, and that was last school year. So we are receiving that data. Public schools are required to report that through their vertical reporting, but they're also required to collect that information from the private programs as well. So there is an initiative to really share practices and understanding of what suspension and expulsion looks like in the early childhood setting. It's not, we do have our training and technical assistance modules, posted on our website, but we still have some work to do to make sure that all pre-qualified private and public pre-K programs know and understand what their obligations are to reduce suspension and expulsion. And if there is an expulsion or suspension for a child, it must be reported. And we have that reporting mechanism on our website as well. Guidance will be forthcoming. Stakeholders meeting will be convened by our State Building Bright Futures Council in the future, and we hope to have more guidance on suspension and expulsion within the next year.
Great, thank you. And so, Kate, I'm just gonna keep you on the hot seat, I think, for just a minute. Similar to Julie's question, this question comes from Caitlin. I'm wondering if you use tools like ECHRS or CLASS as part of your STAR rating program.
So this is Kate. Yes, that's a great question, Caitlin. ECHRS is used in our STARS rating system, as well as programs have the option to use CLASS as well. Our Universal Pre-K Accountability and Continuous Improvement System is incorporating the use of the TPOT, the Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool for classrooms, as well as the ICP, which is the Inclusive Classroom Profile, to support children with disabilities access and participation within the early childhood setting that they are enrolled.
Great, thank you. And don't go anywhere, Kate, because these are questions that are programmatic. So this is why we have a partnership, right? We can answer these questions seamlessly. There was a question that came in from Melissa asking whether or not you see, do you see families turning down special education services because they need full day year-round programming that a private provider offers?
So we don't have actual data to show that, but from anecdotal inquiries that we receive through phone calls and technical assistance that we provide, it seems to be that there is a lower percentage of this happening. I actually thought it would be higher, but it's coming in as lower, which again was surprising to myself as being in this field for a long time. So.
Great. And so we do have a question about funding. I'm going to actually at least hold that question about funding because we already had planned on touching on that with Heather in just a minute. So maybe we want to, I'll just hold that question. So Caitlin has another question. Earlier it was mentioned that PDG money was used to provide some children with full day preschool rather than just the 10 hours. Has any data been collected about how this funding has affected families' enrollment choices? I believe that that's probably a no, but Kate and Heather, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to correct me if that's incorrect.
Yep. I do believe that's a no, but it may be, if we had time to dig a little bit, the surveys that were put out for the family questionnaire, it may be some of those families from our PDG sites. So it would be interesting to cross-reference that.
Yeah, just to interject myself, this is Heather. I think it's a really interesting question. I don't think it was part of our original conceptualization when we wrote the PDG grant. I think that we probably presumed there would be some stability, actually, in where folks were, and were more interested in tracking and beefing up what the services were at the places they were at. So it is an interesting question, and one that we will have to perhaps look at in the future.
Yep. Great. So there were a couple of questions that came in from the registration that I did just want to touch on. And a couple of the questions related to the potential impact of having universal pre-K on the private child care market within the school districts. Questions really being, did universal pre-K have a negative impact on private child care markets in the school district? Another one, have you explored an impact of the growth of pre-K on the early care provision in the same communities? And so the direct answer is I don't know that we have it. That wasn't part of this study. We have separately engaged in an evaluation that was called for by the legislature, where we did have the opportunity to do a mixed methods evaluation, where we did 28 interviews with programs, both private and public, across the state with a representative sample, and also with state-level folks to really dig into some of these questions. I think that we don't have a definitive answer to whether or not it's actually affecting them, though there was a potential perception that if pre-K, public pre-K providers started to provide full day care, there did seem to be a fear, is I think maybe too strong a word, but maybe fear among the private providers that could potentially impact their ability to stay open. So again, there hasn't been a direct, and this study we're talking about today is strictly quantitative, but in that mixed methods, there was some concern among providers around the potential impact. I will say that we are, the second study that we're conducting as part of the REL Universal Pre-K Research Partnership does include data that was collected by the state in a survey of pre-K, pre-qualified pre-K programs, which includes all of them from last year. And we did ask questions that related to what the impact has been on their programs. And so as we start to digest that data and look at that, we hopefully will have some of these answers as well. Okay, there was another question that had come in around how has universal access impacted integrated enrollment for children with special needs and English language learners? I did want to just mention that when we did look at enrollment through the evaluation, when we looked at enrollment in pre-K, kindergartners who had enrolled in pre-K the year before, we did find that children with special education services in kindergarten were more likely to have enrolled in pre-K the year prior to kindergarten, and English learners, which is a very small proportion of our population here in Vermont, but English learners were less likely to have enrolled in pre-K the year prior, but that was a separate evaluation done under a different contract. Okay. So I think
Claire,
maybe next.
Claire,
you
this
may.
is Kate. Can I chime in a little bit on that one?
I would love for you to chime in. Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to share that in Vermont, we have about 73% of our children with disabilities, age 3, 4, and 5, of course, who receive special education services within a regular educational setting. So 73% of all of our children on IEPs are within a typical pre-K private or public program or home-based program. So Vermont is one of the leading states across the country in inclusion of children with disabilities within a regular program. So we're very proud of that fact. And as I reported before, it started way back when, before 1987, that it was a priority that children with disabilities were included in everything that we do. So very proud of that fact.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Act 166 partnerships have provided more placement options for children with disabilities to learn alongside their same age peers. For the English language learners, as Claire shared, we don't have the reliable data yet, although we do provide professional development to school districts and private program personnel to support dual language learners to succeed. And we're working alongside Jim McCobb with K-12, WIDA, and all to support dual language learners for our youngest learners.
Wonderful. That's all very exciting. Yeah, I'm really glad you jumped in, and I think that Vermont is really ahead of the curve on some of the stuff, so it's super exciting. It's great to live here and do work here. So I'm going to move us to our question and answer session with Deputy Secretary Bouchey, but Kate, don't go anywhere because we know we're going to be asking you questions too. So I do want to start. Why don't we start with, we have to get this cute picture up here. So please do submit your questions in the chat. No one is shy, which is exciting because it means you're all paying attention, which is fabulous. So maybe, Heather, we can start with that financing question that came up during registration, and also Elise was asking what funding sources have allowed Universal Pre-K program to take shape.
Sure. Thank you. This is actually a great question. I presume that some of this questioning might be coming from perhaps folks in other states that are thinking of how to fund it themselves at the state level. State funding is, in most states, pretty complicated. Vermont is not immune to that. For the 10 hours a week under Act 166, Kate had mentioned this a minute ago, that there's actually an annual statewide pre-K rate that districts will use in setting their budgets, and then that is the rate that our private providers actually get reimbursed at. So again, in our state, the district or supervisory union, which we kind of snuck in there, it means the same thing in Vermont, is really responsible for their residents, the children in their residence within their geographic boundaries. So primarily, I suspect what folks might be interested in is this is not general fund out of our state budget. This is pretty much all education funding. So, and I would add, we also have funds for school-based pre-K that were happening, as Kate had mentioned, before the Universal Pre-K law, and that's actually built into our standard K-12 funding. We do, I know that our CDD department, Child Development Department, also administers within our Human Services Agency what we call CFAP funds, which are, they're called different things in different states, but this is what we call our Child Care Financial Assistance Program, and so these are federal dollars that families can actually apply for if they meet the largely economic criteria for those, and those are used heavily, I would say, in our private sector. So it's a combination of heavily education fund dollars and then for families who qualify these federal dollars. And I think, I don't know if there's any other major sources of funding. That's really the way it's been designed in our state. And Head Start, right. Yes, Head Start. So the reason I'm saying it's a little complicated is because it depends on, are we talking about pre-K writ large in Vermont, or are we talking about the Universal Pre-K program that's part of 166? Mm-hmm. There are different funding sources that are used depending on which population of students you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's really helpful. So another kind of question around the all right. Well, I guess we have two questions here around the program, and then I would love to switch over to some questions we have around how this study in particular in our partnership has been kind of impacting the work that you do. But so Elise asked, she has one concern about the unintended consequence of infant and toddler care, you know, the costs rising as pre-K students move into publicly funded settings. So how, do you think, from your opinion and from data that you've seen, that Vermont has seen changes to support this concern?
Well, it's a little tricky for us to answer this one because we don't have data on infant and toddler care per se. That would be our partners in CDD. Kate, you might have some just more general knowledge about this from the partnership.
Right. I think that, you know, across the country, infant and toddler care is widely needed, and the prices going up astronomically. So one factor of that, I don't think there is one factor. I don't think that having a universal public pre-K program impacts that directly. I think there's all kinds of other pieces that come into play. The teacher-child ratio, you know, needs to be lower, like a 1-to-3, and so you need more teachers, you know, in a setting for a lesser number of children. So, and then, you know, moving toward high quality, what does that mean? So I think there is a crisis in infant and toddler care, and all states have to look at, you know, what we need to do in order to improve that, for sure.
Great. Yes, I think that sounds right. And so, Heather, can you speak a little bit to the demographic of our students in regard to native languages? I think actually Kate did a really nice job of speaking to how you're addressing the needs of dual language learners, but there was a question that came in from registration regarding what our demographics look like.
Sure, sure. So as of 2017, the last time that we were able to pull the data that I'm referencing here, we really, less than 2% of our K-12 population is English learner. So we're talking about a pretty small number of students and a pretty small percentage. Nonetheless, of course, we want to make sure that all students, including those who qualify for and need English language services, get those. One thing that's pretty unique also about Vermont is that there's no language that really kind of time and time again rises as our primary non-English language, if that makes any sense. So for instance, in 2017, our most commonly used language other than English within our testing population was Nepali at 0.4%, and Spanish was second at 0.2%. So you can see that these are quite small. They're each far less than 1%, and totaling all of our English language students together, as I said, it's less than 2%. I think the year before that, the most prevalent language was Portuguese. So one of the things that's unique and pretty wonderful, actually, about Vermont is that we have a very strong refugee resettlement set of programs in our state, and that's a big part of why we have a pretty variable set of languages that are spoken. So we look quite different than other states, for instance, where it might be that, they've identified that, a very large percentage of students in their districts speak Spanish or speak Mandarin, and they're able then to really tailor services in a more, I would say, wide-scale level than we are. So we're pretty unique in that way, and I just wanted to make sure that the audience is aware of that. Usually when we're talking about ELL in Vermont, it looks very different than it does in other states. That's not to say it's not important, though, and as Kate mentioned, we certainly do take that work very seriously here at the agency.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. So I want to jump into, again, thinking a little bit more about this work and the research that we've done together and how it's kind of impacting the work that all of you do at the agency. So what are some ways in which the state has used the results from this study?
So yeah, it's a great question, and it's great to take a moment personally for me to kind of pause and, engage in remember when. And so I can remember when we first started thinking about this partnership and how wonderful an opportunity that was for folks here at the agency, because it allowed us to really crystallize with our partners also at CDD what it was that we really wanted to look at as a state within this policy space. So what were the goals of the legislation, and what were the critical questions that really needed to be answered and that we could answer at the time, given some significant data challenges that we've experienced as a state. Just to provide a little bit more context for folks that are on the webinar, we were one of the real latter states to actually get a federal SLDS, Student Longitudinal Data System grant. And so it's been really tough for us to fully capture the I guess, the promise of our pre-K data without having a much more robust SLDS setup. The good news is we're well on our way now to actually making that happen, but it has been a bit rough and rugged during the past couple of years. So two things. I think having this partnership really allowed for some space to actually consider what the questions are that we needed to prioritize. And then, of course, once we figured out that, we really had no bandwidth to do the type of research, and in particular the mixed methods research that Claire has mentioned on our own as an agency, or even as two agencies, just given what our bandwidth was in that space. So I think we could not have really done this work and learned about what's actually happening on the ground in terms of pre-K in a much more, I guess I would say, sophisticated or certainly in a statewide level like this. I think that we would have been still thinking about, trying to put things together from a more anecdotal place. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really powerful for us to have this information as we go back to the legislature and talk about the trends that are apparent in the work that the REL has done, and then, look at some of the things that might be surprising to folks, including ourselves, about what some of the findings are showing. Mm-hmm. So I think, without a doubt, we are very strong fans of the research partnership model with REL. We actually can't say enough positive accolades about it. So, and I'm very happy if folks want to, email me offline or talk in more detail about how that was set up. I'm really happy to chat with folks about that. But I think we would consider this a very successful partnership, and would certainly not have been able to do this work without the presence and the experience and expertise of Claire and other folks at the REL.
Oh, and we did not pay her to say that. I just want everyone to be aware of that. And it is one of those things that I appreciate hearing, that even just having that space to kind of sit back and think as a team, and think as a team across agencies, which of course, as we all know, is not always easy to do, about what is it that really matters most to all of you and that you need to know about. It's great to hear that that's actually in and of itself a value add. So I know, last year we presented these results to the legislature, and obviously have been in contact with you around this along the way. So is there, how do you foresee this this study in particular, but also the additional work that we have planned in the study that we have coming up around that looks more at the actual programs? How might you see that kind of impacting Act 166 as it evolves, or the work that you all specifically do at your agency?
Sure. Yeah, these are great questions. There's so many different ways I might respond to this question. I'll pick two. So one of the things that's really fascinating to me is, as you pointed, as your one of your early slides showed, it's really about half and half in terms of whether parents are choosing private care settings, or they're enrolling their students in public settings at the actual district's schools. So, and there's a lot of, I think we need to do a lot of work to unpack that more. There's a lot underlying that sort of quote-unquote choice assumption. But I actually find it really fascinating, because I think it would be remiss to not mention some of the challenges of this model to our audience, which is it is tough to actually have a program that's actually administered by two different agencies who, honestly, I think come from the pre-K, come at the pre-K space, if you will, from pretty different philosophies. So I think we've done a really admirable job of working together, but I could not say that it's been easy all along, from, nitty-gritty issues like figuring out how to do fingerprinting when there are different requirements that actually go back to federal requirements, whether you're talking about education or human services. So I think, it's interesting and fascinating to see just that one piece. It just reminds me of this is the space that we're in, where there really is a dual model. It's not just how we actually administer this program at a state level. It really is the reality in terms of how families seem to be interested in accessing these universal funds and these opportunities. The other piece that I think is really critical as we move forward and sort of thinking about how we think of what needs to go forth, and then also, talking with the legislature about how things need to go forth, really has to do with, as I just mentioned, unpacking some of these findings a little bit. I think that when I look at some of the findings for students who are designated as, who have IEPs or who, at least as far as we can tell, qualify for free and reduced lunch. There are some challenges, as we know, with obtaining that data at such a young age and depending on the context students are in. I'm really struck by, we really need to know more about how this overlays with the geography of Vermont. So, Vermont is certainly a small state for folks who don't know much about our state, but it has a lot of variability in terms of rurality and, urbanicity. It has a lot of different regions in terms of, ruggedness and topography and transportation issues. It certainly has a lot of variability in terms of the population density in certain areas, and it clearly has differences in terms of economic success and the what I would call the level of economic duress in a particular region. And so I think we need to look at how those features are actually playing out in terms of whether parents can choose or not from a true universal way. And then the last thing I would say, because I could just keep going on, Claire, as you know, is that I think, and you didn't get to talk a lot about the mixed methods approach that you adopted in this study that the REL did, but I really think it's such a smart way to approach this work when you've got folks with differing ideas about what the purpose of universal pre-K might be. You've got different ideas about where it should occur. I think really having both the quantitative data that Claire did a really lovely job today presenting, but also some of the stuff that she hasn't yet had a chance to share, which is her qualitative work with stakeholders, was a real beautiful contribution to what we need in terms of our policy space. As you might imagine, in a highly rural state, in a state with a citizen legislature, folks can be more or less skeptical of the numbers. And so really having, that more qualitative piece of, and here's what folks that I actually talked with said, and that does or does not align with the data, and most of the time, as you know, it did, I think it really has gone a long way towards convincing folks, including our legislators so far, that really, this is important, this is meaningful, we need to pay attention to this and move forward. I can't say that always happens when the legislature commissions a report. Sometimes it commissions a report and then, it might get some attention, but perhaps not quite the level of follow-up as we would hope and anticipate given the amount of work that went into the report. I don't think that's the case here. I think this is really critical. I think everyone gets that and agrees. We might not agree on what the next step is, but I think that this is an important piece of information and sets of information. It's quite a rich study that will really help us figure that out together.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. So I wanted to clarify for attendees, I've put in the chat a link to this legislative report that Heather was just referencing. So it is separate from the REL Northeast Islands work that we presented on today, but it sort of built off of it. So of course we had developed our partnership And then when the legislature called for this, commissioned this evaluation, we responded and won the contract, and so we did that, and it complemented, again, the work that we did here. So that's what Heather is referencing there. So you can feel free to go ahead and check that out as well. Great. So we do have a few more minutes. I don't want to hold people unnecessarily. I'm not seeing a lot of questions come in. I did want to just speak to Barbara, had a comment that really, I think, relates to just being really clear about what we're referencing when we're talking about public pre-K. And yes, Barbara, it is referring to many settings. So again, it's a mixed delivery system. You have children who are in private child care settings, private family home-based settings, as well as public pre-K settings. Children may be full-time, they may be part-time, they may be part private pay. All we know from the data that we have available is if they attended, if they were enrolled in public pre-K, which would be that 10 hours a week for Act 166. So that's what we're referring to when we're talking about public pre-K or kids who are enrolled in public pre-K. They may have been also private pay outside of those 10 hours, but that's what we're referencing. So of course, there are a lot of nuances that we would need to unpack before we start to unpack anything related to, say, the effectiveness of the pre-K program or anything like that. So we're still in the infancy of kind of making sure that the data systems are there, that we have the right data, that we can really address these questions. But you're right, Barbara, we should definitely be sure to be extremely clear about what we mean when we're saying public pre-K, because it is a little bit more complicated, as early childhood research tends to be, given all the funding structures and streams and all of that. So Kate and Heather, I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we close, or I hand it back over to Shanna to close the webinar?
Thanks. I think we have covered pretty much everything that we wanted to. It's actually interesting. I would actually agree with both your response to, but also Barbara's question. In my mind, I have to always remember that the general is publicly funded pre-K. And then when we talk about where it is, it's either public pre-K or private pre-K. But that's my own little mnemonic or tool that I've used to kind of keep it straight. I think that we have covered, again, what we thought we were going to cover, and we are all set from this end. Awesome. And I would just say, if folks, I think that my email might be on the slide, so happy, and Kate as well, happy to entertain any additional follow-up questions. I know when I attend webinars, I often have many more questions after I reflect on the content a bit more, so happy to respond offline as well in that capacity.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for being willing to be here, to have a conversation off the cuff, to represent Vermont. We know that, your agency and the Child Development Division have been absolutely fantastic partners in this work, and we're very thankful to all of you for engaging in it with us. Thank you, everyone, so much for taking the time this afternoon to join our webinar. We really greatly appreciate it.